Thank you, Sangapurna. That was beautiful. And yeah, it's lovely to see you here this evening, introducing me. Yeah, it's a fantastic friendship that we're fortunate to share, and having had travelled quite a long way together, and hopefully quite a lot further as well. It's good to see Sam in the background.
Good to see you too.
So this is a bit weird, really. I'm on my phone, and I can see all these dots at the bottom of the screen, but that's each dot probably represents 3 or 4 people, and but that's as far as it goes. I can't see. The only face I can see at the moment is Sangapurna's, and so for the time being, this talk's for you, Sangapurna. Until I get a different face on the screen. So yeah, it's a bit weird talking to a camera and not being able to see who's on the other side of it. So I'll start my talk. Yeah, I'd really actually just like to start my talk by expressing, firstly, some gratitude. Gratitude to 4 people who really helped me so much in the early days of coming into contact with the Dharma. They are Padma Siddhi, who I believe is here tonight, Siladasa, Kema Dhamma, and Nagabodhi. Each of these men offered me something uniquely of themselves in the context of friendship, encouragement, and example. I'd also like to express my gratitude to Sangharakshita for his presentation of the Dharma and for starting the movement and order which we belong to, the movement that we belong to, and in some cases the order. This has provided the context in which I was radically able to change my life and which introduced me to the Buddha's teachings. I'd also like to thank the Buddha for his realization and commitment throughout his life to communicating his insights and a path to follow, a path to practice. At the beginning of June this year, after a period in which I was battling with a very restless mind, I decided to change my morning practice in the following way. This is something that possibly we all do from time to time, to try and increase our focus, increase our commitment, search for inspiration, etc. But on this occasion, the way in which I changed my practice was that I started each morning by chanting the Tiratna Vandana. I then followed this by the recitation aloud of the 4 reminders, and then I concluded with a 7-fold puja. And if you like, these were a form of preliminary practice for me, because after having done these things, my mind would be still, and I would then go on for a period of meditation. Usually this meditation was my visualization practice, or when I say my visualization practice, it was the visualization practice that was given to me at the time of my ordination. And it is the visualization of the 4-armed Avalokiteshvara. To give you a little bit of a sense of part of that morning routine, because I've been doing it since making that change at the beginning of June. So that's some 4, almost 5 months now. Excuse me. Yeah, so to give you a bit of a sense of that, I thought I would actually just like to read the 3rd of these 4 reminders. This particular reminder is on karma. And at the moment, it's the one that's really standing out for me in terms of a significance for what I'm working on in my life. And I think it might help it seems particularly relevant to what I'm about to say. So this is the reminder of on karma. I'll read it reasonably slowly, so hopefully you can take it in. Everywhere I look in the universe, I see things arising and passing away in dependence upon conditions. From galaxies and stars to microorganisms, this pattern holds true. Things aren't random. They have causes and effects. This is also true of my life. What I am today is the product of many influences. My family, culture, education, and relationships. It's also the product of choices I've made, of how I've acted, of my mental states and habits. There are many things I cannot alter, and these I must accept. But I can change those conditions that spring from my mind. I can change how I think. I can affect how I feel. Meditation and Dharma practice give me ways to do so. I know that skillful actions have brought me happiness and fulfillment and have benefited others. When I've been kind or generous, I've seen others benefit, and it has given me happiness. I know that my unskillful actions have harmed others and harmed me too. When I have been unkind, I have seen the pain I have caused. Those actions have reinforced negative states of mind that make me unhappy, and I've felt remorse and regret. Therefore, I should cultivate positive states, practice skillful action, and avoid unskillful ones. This means practicing the Dharma, which offers a sure path to establishing positive conditions. To this path, I commit myself. And I think if you're able to take any of that in, you can see the relevance of it to each of our lives. We are the things that we do. We are our mental states. And it's important, I think, for me, when I start my day, just to have that as one of these 4 precious reminders, to keep my focus, my inspiration at the center of my life. It seems crazy in a way to say that we need to be reminded of those things, but so easily our minds are taken away by other things that are going on in our lives, other concerns that we may have, and we can become distracted from some of those principles with which we follow to live our lives. So it's a great way to start my day. So, but before I go on any further with that, I thought at this point it might be helpful to give you a little background from the early part of my life. I was born in 1957, the youngest of 4 children, to parents who were dairy farmers. This was in northern Victoria, close to the Murray River. Nearby is the township of Cuyuna, where I was born and attended school. My parents were also practicing Seventh-day Adventists, which meant that my childhood was strict, conservative, religious, and somewhat isolated. As a general rule, we didn't mix in our community due to these religious differences. Overall, my impression of my childhood was that it was a steady, secure, but a challenging time. Highlights were the many opportunities I had for spending time in nature and open spaces, which included, and this also included highly charged, imaginative life. I had lots of friends that other people couldn't see when I was a very small boy, and I had quite a fantasy life going up until the age of school. But one of the things that I really enjoyed most was being able to sit. This is more into my teenage years, but I used to love sitting and watching animals, their behavior, understanding, trying to understand what they were up to, why they were doing what they were doing. And I used to read copious quantities of books, or books that I could get my hands on anyway, about animals at that time. And I think it was certainly a fascination for animals, but more to the point, it was a fascination for behavior. And in a sense, it was trying to understand perhaps my own behavior through another prism. Work was a very strong part of our family culture and was seen as the cure to everything that ailed you. So basically, if you were happy, you worked. If you are sad, you worked. Work was the solution for everything. You didn't have time to be depressed, you didn't have time to read, you worked. And partly this was the ethos of that period of time in the late 50s and the 60s. Partly it was my parents, partly because we were dairy farmers and there was lots to do. Our parents instilled many other positive values into us, and we were all taught to help out and to take responsibility at an early age. And of course, there was daily Bible study, and this was particularly the case on the Sabbath, which started on Friday night sunset and went through to Saturday night sunset. During that Sabbath period, there were no secular activities to be engaged in. The only things we did were to look after the cows. Every Saturday, we'd all pile into the car and we'd drive 60 kilometres to our local church, which was in Echuca. Most of the expressions of love in my family were related to God, to the love of God, which most of the time I found actually quite challenging, quite difficult. And I spent a lot of my childhood craving love. And the only way to really engage with that was to engage in the religion, which I did from time to time, quite wholeheartedly, but other times not so much. At 18, I left home and I moved to Melbourne. I was rapt. I was so keen to get out and find my own legs and independence. There were so many things that had been forbidden to me during the period of my upbringing that I had a very long list of things I wanted to try out. And this frankly horrified my parents, as I said about trying out these forbidden things. At the age of 19, my parents learned that I was gay. And of course, this was a very difficult time for all concerned, with arguments that would continue in different ways for the rest of their lives. I had many enjoyable times during those early years of adult life, and whilst I was exploring my independence. I changed jobs many times. I couldn't settle, although I did have a few years where I worked making costumes for theatre, and I really enjoyed that. The pay was lousy, but it was creative, it was fun, and we got to smoke dope while we were sitting out in the sun making costumes, which was quite nice. I also had the opportunity between the ages of 35 and 40 to live overseas. I lived in Switzerland and Germany, and during this time I learned to speak French, which I can technically still speak, and German, which I have largely forgotten. Despite quite a lot of happy times during my early adult life, there were unfortunately quite a lot of dark times as I was making little progress in finding a sense of meaning and purpose in my life. This became increasingly a strong theme in my thinking, and yeah, by the time I was getting close to 40, I'd sort of run out of things to try, really, to find happiness and meaning. I was starting to get a bit frantic. And of course, at the age of 39, my mother died. I was living in Germany at the time, and I did come back to care for her for several weeks before her death, which was difficult because my relationship with her was difficult. It's something that I very much value and recommend that if we have the opportunity to care for a dying parent, that we not shy away from that. But die she did, and despite the difficult relationship I had with her, I found the grieving process of her death, quite challenging. And it probably went on for a couple of years before I started to get on top of it. There was a period where I felt quite ashamed, actually, because I realized that I wasn't just grieving for my mother. I was grieving for my own mortality. I was just that one step closer to my own grave, and here I was, still not knowing what the hell I was going to do with my life. And so that amped up my feelings of that my life needed to have purpose. It needed a goal. And so it was in this period that I decided, at the suggestion of a good friend, that maybe I needed to turn my mind back towards religion. I blamed religion for a lot of my problems through my adult life, and had turned my back on all those such matters. And so it was quite an opening just to consider the possibility of exploring religion, a spiritual life again. But it was clear it definitely had to be different to what it had been. And I really, I wasn't all that crazy about the notion of this one true God that was so present in the lives of my family. So I returned from overseas at 40, and a year later, just after my 41st birthday, I enrolled in an Introduction to Traditional Buddhist Meditation course, which coincidentally was the same course that Rija Mai did when she was a young woman. We attended that course as students together. Basically, I've been meditating ever since. I was a really good student. I was a conscientious student. I was taught meditation. I was there to learn, and so I went home and I did it. And I was actually surprised when other people in the class would perhaps not meditate, only maybe once or twice for the week. And I wasn't doing it 7 days a week, but I was certainly meditating quite frequently. And that's continued until now. So that's 22 years ago. And that was in part because in that first week of meditating, I had quite a lot of beginner's mind experiences. And I discovered to my great surprise, that my mind was capable of states of stillness, peace, and expansiveness. Intuitively, despite any misgivings I'd had about entering the realm of Buddhism, I knew that I'd discovered something that could really help me to find that elusive meaning in my life. At the conclusion of that course, I enrolled in an introduction to Buddhism course at our Pitt Street Centre. And then a couple of weeks after that concluded, I attended my first retreat out at Westburn. And this was a men's weekend retreat. It was an amazing experience, which blew me away. It also provided my first opportunity to participate in puja. I have no memory now of what the theme was about, but I remember the friendship and the puja just blew me away. So I sat in the puja, deciding that I was only going to sit and observe and not get caught up in this mumbo jumbo. And all of a sudden I found myself standing very self-consciously in front of the shrine in order to make an offering. In that moment, I felt something shift inside me, as many of the hesitations and resistances I'd been holding on to simply fell away. Returning home on the Sunday afternoon, I burst into tears as many stirred up emotions found their way to the surface. The friendliness of the men was overwhelming, with their genuine interest and inquiries about how I was going. I remember feeling like I had to reach inside myself to try and honestly reply to their interest, which was on some levels quite exhausting, as I wasn't used to men taking such a genuine and friendly interest in me. Afterwards, well, a few weeks afterwards, I asked to become a mitra. But that didn't happen until the following May, the May of 99, on Buddha Day. Later on that same year, over the Christmas New Year period, there was for many years we had a long men's retreat that would go over the New Year period, starting just after Christmas and going through. And it was about a 9 or a 10-day retreat. And so I enrolled on that retreat. And some of the guys that I met on the retreat were going on to attend a GFR retreat, or in other words, a retreat for men who are training for ordination. And it was then that I started to think about training for ordination myself. But I also knew I was moving rather quickly, and perhaps I needed just to slow down a little bit. So I decided to postpone thinking about ordination, but by April of 99, I couldn't wait any longer and sent off my request just 9 months after starting that initial meditation course. In January of 2000, I found myself standing in a shrine room in New Zealand with about 30 other men saluting the shrine. I can still remember myself standing in a shrine room in New Zealand with I can still remember the tingling sensations in my back as I stood there with others, infused with combined focus and concentration on the shrine. Towards the end of that retreat, I was thrown for a bit of a loop by an encounter with Avalokiteshvara, which left me thinking that I was well on the way to madness. I didn't actually know it was Avalokiteshvara at the time. I knew something had happened. I couldn't explain it. And it wasn't for many months until I was reading Basandra's book, Meeting the Buddhas, that I realized that what I had experienced was the thousand-armed form of Avalokiteshvara. Fortunately, I had the opportunity at that time to talk with Kema Dhamma about the experience I'd had that night in the shrine room. And I was reassured that all was well. And that did, in fact, start a growing connection with Avalokiteshvara. 4 years later, I was standing in Spain, in the valley that Sangapurna mentioned, the secret valley that we know as Guhyaloka, ready to start a 4-month ordination retreat. In May of 2004, I became Arunamalin or Arunamalin, which means encircled, surrounded, or garlanded by the dawn sun. I was wrapped with the name. I couldn't believe my good fortune, and I was incredibly grateful to Nagabodhi for choosing such a beautiful name. It took me a while to get used to being able to say it, but the meaning just resonated so strongly, this beautiful image. And in fact, what Nagabodhi didn't know was that in the weeks leading up to the private ordination, I'd been going to the end of the valley most mornings to watch the sun rise, and then scurrying back in time for meditation. So it only seemed, quite auspicious and significant. The other aspect of that time was just that I was really excited. I was really pleased to have a sense of leaving my old life behind. I didn't want to be that person that I had been anymore. I wanted to be a new person, a transformed person. Unfortunately, it doesn't quite work like that, but nonetheless, it was a significant turning point, and my life was changed by that experience. I wanted my new life, to be based in skillfulness rather than the many years of unskillfulness that had preceded that moment. So that was 6 years from the meditation course to ordination. And so I probably should fill in some of the other details of that 6-year period. There had been periods where I'd actually questioned whether ordination was the right thing for me to do. I did have periods of doubt. It wasn't just plain sailing. And I'm very grateful for those times when I did question that, because it just helped to make me more certain that this is the direction I wanted to take my life. And it wasn't just because I wanted to be an order member and I wanted to have one of these. I actually started to become clear when sitting on top of a mountain next to a stupa in Sudarshanaloka in New Zealand. It was the beginning of January of 2002. Deep in meditation, well, as deep as I would get in those days. And I realized that all I wanted to do with my life, this impermanent impermanent thing that we hold on to so dearly, was to do something useful with my life, to be of help. And the best thing that I could think of to help, to be of use, was to be ordained, because then it would help me in not only changing my own life, but by so doing, help me to communicate the Dharma. This is so important to me. Other things that happened during that time was that we started a new centre in the city, in the CBD, and I was part of the team of Tapankara and Siladasa as we renovated this building that was given to us for very little rent, and we turned it into a Buddhist centre. We were only there for a few years before we decided to close it. But it was an exciting project that brought the Sangha together. And it was a lot of work, but so many people from our Sangha helped, not only in the renovation, but the ongoing classes that we ran there. And it was a beautiful centre. I also, during that time in 2003, Maitripala had some time out from classes at the Dandenong Ranges Buddhist Centre, Buddhist community, and I would go up every, I think, 2 or 3 weeks just to support those classes, and it was lovely just to get to know, the hill folk, the tree huggers, and to support their classes, and that was, it was a delightful thing to do up there. And also at that time, I helped, Manjusita spoke last week, if you heard that, and he spoke about his coffee business that he tried to run as a right livelihood business. And I helped him out for about a year with that. I didn't really connect with the vision that he had. I was too spiritually mature, I think, to take that on. And in the end, I withdrew from that in order to actually take part in this new centre in Melbourne CBD. Other things, I became the treasurer of the MBC. I think it was in 2001, and I think I was treasurer for about 6 years. And that was quite a big job in those days, and so I was involved in quite a lot of admin around the centre. It was quite a busy time for me, but a time that was filled with a lot of growth, and some friendships that have arisen out of that time have been are incredibly important to me, and they weren't always easy because there was so much to do, but we really grew together well, and particularly my friendship with Siladasa went through quite a lot of changes over the years, and there's a closeness, there's something I share with him that I share with no one else, simply because of all the time that we've spent working together. And just, I guess, to top it off, apart from all of that, in 2001, I also left a 16-year relationship, and I started a new relationship with Andrew, my current partner, in 2001. So that was quite a, there's a lot to process also during a change in relationship like that. There were lots of times during that 6 years when I just couldn't believe the changes in my life, and I really felt the need to pinch myself at times. My life was so radically different. It was so positive. But I mean, it wasn't always happy, but it was definitely positive. The extent to which it wasn't always happy, was that I was being stretched all the time, and sometimes being stretched is a little bit painful. And, you know, I guess there were so many changes. I probably was struggling at times just to keep up with trying to integrate those changes in my life. Post-ordination, life continued actually much the same as before for the following 3 years. There were some additional responsibilities that came my way as a result of being ordained. But you know, it had been fairly full on. I just need to catch up with myself in my text. I have found it interesting when I think back to those times, how much I was living a life of responsibility, which is the life that I'd actually been taught by my parents. And here I was living out a life of responsibility under a very different, in a very different framework. But if I look at in context of body, speech, and mind, you know, I hadn't really made enough progress at that time to work on the more subtle aspects of mind precepts, mind actions. But I certainly was focused on working in the areas of bodily actions and speech. And speech has been a really important part of my practice over many, many years. In 2007, somewhat exhausted, I rather abruptly resigned all my responsibilities at the NBC. And a few months later, I moved to my current location, which is on a property on the outskirts of Malden in central Victoria. Unfortunately, the abruptness of the change created unnecessary hardship for some of my friends at the NBC, which I later came to regret and apologise for. But I loved the move back to nature and open spaces, reminiscent of my childhood. I was able to focus more on reflection, self-examination, and integration. This was at times very challenging, just trying to be more honest with myself about who I was, where I was at. Some of the difficulties I'd found myself in, what I'd contributed to the creation of those difficulties. But I was so glad that I had the framework of the 10 precepts to guide my practice. And I certainly started to put a lot of emphasis again on practicing the speech precepts. I think, as I alluded to before, I'd caused a lot of pain during my early adult life to people around me. And mostly my family and my parents were the target of that. And I came to realize how challenging, how difficult and painful speech can be when used unskillfully. And so I was really dead motivated to change this and to try and you know, to have kindly speech, to have helpful speech, etc. And so, yeah, I did focus on that quite a lot. I also had some really good examples around me. And in particular, I'd like to single out Nagabodhi. When I was training for ordination, there were times that he helped me quite significantly, you know, by telling me a few home truths, actually, but doing it with such incredible kindness that I felt that he was on my side. Here he was sort of telling me something about myself as he saw it, but he was on my side. And I just couldn't believe it. I just thought, how can this man do this? I want this skill. Give it to me. Anyway, one has to learn these skills for oneself. And so, but it was fantastic to have that, to have had that experience and to have exemplars of kindly speech around me. So yeah, during that time, there was that focus more and more on the precepts, and in time, I actually started to find that the mind precepts started to reveal themselves more fully to me as I became a lot more aware of my mental states during the course of the day. Since I've moved up here, I still have my, basically weekly visits to the city, except for COVID and the Ring of Steel. But that's often to participate in men's study in the chapter that I belong to, and I also meet up with lots of people. So I still have quite a lot of engagement with the NBC despite the distance. In fact, sometimes I think I might have more engagement than some of the people who live in the city. But 5 years ago, I think it was, I became a private preceptor. Sangapurna mentioned this before and explained that as a result of becoming a private preceptor, I'm able to conduct private ordinations for men within our order. And so at that time, when you witness that going for refuge of the ordinand, you give them the 10 order precepts and a new name and a visualization practice. And so as Sangapurna said, in 2018, I was privileged to perform that responsibility for Maitri-Karshan and Sangapurna in the same place in the valley in Spain in which I had taken ordination 14 years earlier. This was such a joyful occasion in so many ways, and it felt that I'd travelled full circle, that somehow or other I was finally giving back something to the Dharma that I had received through so many of the people that had guided me and given to me so generously. To be able to sort of complete that circle and then to ordain these two men, was very meaningful. Unfortunately, when I got back from that retreat, my heart started to play up. So who knows what's going to happen from there. But it wasn't because of the ordination. On balance, I think it's probably fair for me to say that over the years of practice, one of the most influential aspects of practice has been spiritual friendship. And that's not just because I was this boy living on a dairy farm when I was a kid looking for love. Certainly that's part of the story. And I do enjoy the warmth of friendship, the love that so often comes my way. But it's just stunning to be involved with people that are consciously attempting to make positive changes in their life and to, in some way, play a part of that process and to witness the way we all change as we practice. And on a personal level, that it certainly helps to increase my shraddha, my confidence in the path that we follow, because we can all, when you see it working in others, there's part of me that there are times when we don't see it necessarily working within us, but we know if it's working in others, it's probably working in us too, if we're really putting our energy behind that. And so it's fantastic to be able to experience that. I mean, spiritual friendship obviously has a way of taking you beyond yourself as well, and to see yourself as a reflection of other people, which can challenge your self-view, you letting down the barriers that we hold up between ourselves and other people. It's fantastic. It's hard work sometimes to allow ourselves to be vulnerable, but the rewards to that are so great. And so it does really challenge our fixed self-view in a way that possibly other things don't work as effectively for me. So, you know, spiritual friendship has been such a wonderful part of my practice. When I think back now, it's difficult to imagine what direction my life may have gone in if I had not enrolled in that meditation course 32 years ago. It's given me patience, kindness, the warmth of spiritual friendship, and engagement with the Bodhisattva ideal, and ethical guidelines, all of which serve to give me purpose and meaning in my life, as well as a constructive and positive framework to transform that previous existence. If I hadn't had that opportunity, I can't help but think that I'd still be wandering around in circles, looking for happiness and pleasure in all the wrong places and without a sense of a life well lived. So I have much to be grateful for what I have been able to gain through practicing the Dharma and living an ordered life. And I know the time is getting by. I just looked at the time for the first time. So I won't read what I was going to read. I'm just going to leave it there. Lovely to talk to you.